Coming up, they are two of the wildest signing day videos we've seen in quite some time, and we'll react to them both next, right here on SEC Country Live. Buckle up, it's going to be a wild hour here on SEC Country Live. I'm Brandon Adams. This is the former Alabama All-American Mike Johnson. He and I both have been really all over the place today trying to sort of collect every piece of information that comes in as SEC teams rack up all across the board for signing day. Big day for a lot of the schools, maybe the best of all, Georgia. We'll talk about a lot of that. What a signing day has been around the league here.
Yeah, I think everybody thought there would be like a damper because of the early signing period. Boy, there's been just as much drama today as there has on any other signing day. Just a little more focused, but there's been a ton of drama.
So sometimes here in SEC Country Live, we're late breaking here with stuff that just happened. An example of that today. We're also going to be fairly loose with our format. We'll still do the first and 10. We'll still do all the big news, but we're going to give you a chance to sort of direct the commentary in today's show a good bit, reminding us of some things we may be leaving out as a lot of these schools have made a lot of movement here. One of the big stories to kind of come in here, in just really the last few minutes, the very dramatic scene for the wide receiver Jacob Copeland from Pensacola, Florida, who chose between Alabama and Tennessee and Florida. Well, his pick was the Florida Gators, but the family of Copeland, mother in particular, maybe not too happy with that decision. This is a crazy video. Take a look at how this unfolded on ESPN a little earlier. Barrett Sallee caught it on Twitter. So Copeland puts the Florida hat on. You see Copeland's mom in the Alabama hat. Getting
Tennessee hat, Alabama sweater.
Yeah, so Tennessee hat. That's a great point. Yeah, so you get the Tennessee hat on, the Alabama sweater. What looks to be some Tennessee orange in the background there. Copeland's wearing a red sport coat. He chooses Florida. What in the wide world of sports is going on with that? What is that?
I don't know. There's some serious inter-family fallout right there at Escambia High School over there in Pensacola, Florida. And you obviously, you flip it on. He comes on ESPN too. She got the Alabama shirt, the Tennessee hat. I think that was an uncle of his behind him. He's got the Tennessee, garb all over the place. And he picks Florida, and he's wearing a red suit. Boy, she grabs her purse and just walks right in front of the camera. Like, I want everybody to see me on the way out.
Yeah, literally. That's like the biggest part of it. She goes in front of the camera on her way out there, really sort of firmly cementing, her problem with it all. You'll see it again here as he puts the hat on. I mean, she is not having it. She is upset.
Watch her walk right in front of the camera. Like, it's just like, you know what, I'm not even walking on the side.
But no one seems to be that surprised by the fact that she's standing up here. I mean, the guy sitting to Copeland's left, he's a little confused about it maybe. Yeah. But nobody else really even looks at it all that much. And I got to tell you something. I think I probably owe Copeland a little bit of an apology here, because I sort of mocked the notion yesterday when he said, "Oh man, I'm so torn. You have no idea how hard this is."
Yeah.
I said,
that's a good point.
That's him kind of just wanting to sort of build the drama for his decision. I said yesterday I don't fault him for that, but I said, this is a guy that's obviously just trying to have a good time.
Right.
He's pulling people's leg on Twitter. As it turns out, maybe he really was that conflicted, so much so that there's disagreement among his family about where he should go. And what do you make of the mom supporting two different SEC teams?
It's tough because you always want to feel like, moms are right and mom should have an input. And we talk so many times in recruiting about, hey, my mom likes this place, my mom likes that place. We saw videos of Richard, whoever that was last week talking about it's cleaning his room. And yet, I still feel like this mom in this instance should be happy if Jacob Copeland wants to go to Florida. That she should be happy he wants to go to Florida. I don't know. I don't know the inner workings. I don't know the story. But I just feel like that my mom would have been happy wherever I ended up, and I got to feel like you would feel the same way about your children.
Yeah, I would think so, man. Certainly for my own children, I'd be thrilled with them no matter where they went. Although if you look at me, my son's not going to be doing with these videos one day. I can promise you that.
Well, that would be a bad day if you had to, if your son rolled out and put on the gator hat.
No, I'm saying that would be a very bad day. But I'm saying if you look at my physique, the odds of my son one day picking between any bunch of hats, that's probably not going to happen if he follows in his dad's footsteps on that. But that's not the only crazy video we saw today. Quay Walker, four-star linebacker from down in Crisp County in Cordele, Georgia. Alabama commit, thought to be at one time a Tennessee lean. We also thought that Georgia was pushing hard for him in the final 24 hours. There had been some online chatter about that. In Cordele today, Walker makes his decision. If you thought the Copeland video was dramatic, a little bit of that same drama from Quay Walker here. Take a look at this. So Walker's getting ready to choose. All right, so he puts the Tennessee hat on and then throws it off. The tearaway pants, the shirt, rocking the Georgia black here, and then you're talking about a classy kid going with the straw hat, Georgia hat. I like that as a choice for him there. I mean, he looks like a Ryder Cup captain. Very dignified there for Quay.
I don't know. I mean, the classy is not the word I come up with after throwing the Tennessee hat off to the side, but you know, he's going to go about his own ceremony the way he wants to.
Classy attire.
Yeah.
If you're a Tennessee fan, you don't like it. I mean, I didn't mind it so much, but if you're a Tennessee
fan. I'm sure you didn't mind it at all. I'm not a fan when kids do this, but he definitely, listen, the outfit does pull it all together.
Well, and listen, what I'm confused about with Quay Walker is I thought Jeremy Pruitt was his boy.
Yeah, that's kind of what I mean. Like, I feel like, listen, these people at Tennessee have been nothing but nice to you. They've been nothing but nice to you. They've built you up. They've talked about.
I bet they're not nice right now.
Yeah,
check his Twitter mentions right now. No, I bet this hospitable Tennessee fans. I bet they have long.
I wouldn't be happy with him either. He takes the Tennessee off. He throws. I mean, this
is a kid. Let the kid have his moment.
Oh, you love him because he goes to Georgia. You love him because he goes to Georgia. If he had done this to Georgia, this would be a whole other topic of discussion.
Let the kid have his moment.
That hat still hasn't landed. That hat is somewhere over the city of Atlanta right now. That thing still hasn't landed. It's tough. It's a tough day for a lot of people that are involved with some of these schools, and they get spurned. Listen, you know, we saw Jarvis Landry response to Patrick Surtain's subtweets him. It's one of those days where it really, really hurts at times to get on Twitter and get on social media. There's a lot of people that just aren't handling things.
Okay, so here's what we're going to do. We're going to do our first and 10. We're going to go through all of this. Let me hit a few comments here as well. We're going to be very loose today. If you watch the show, you know, we're going to do all the things that we normally do, but I want to give you all a chance to react. I want to give you a chance to sort of, talk about how your signing day class comes together for your team. So we'll kind of do a lot of that here. Seth Howard says the Vols got trolled ×2. I mean, if you're a Tennessee fan, do you feel that way, that you had the Tennessee gear on the podium for Copeland? I mean, if I'm a Vols fan, I do think that's good news. We've seen the guys throw the hats before, so maybe you do kind of hold your breath with Walker for a minute. But, I mean, I didn't really put two and two together on that until just right now, that the Copeland video is a bit of a swerve against Tennessee, too.
Yeah, it definitely is. And I think that, that was kind of par for the course for Tennessee today. I think they had 2 commits that flipped to Florida State. They just didn't have as big of a day as I know a lot of Tennessee fans probably hoped they would, and this video kind of adds on to that. And that to me, it's like I said, I don't think any Tennessee fan is at a love loss for Quay Walker or Jacob Copeland.
And Bo Molinari kind of joining you saying it's not classy to throw the Vol hat. I mean, it was like classy attire. I think the golf straw hat's a classy hat. Y'all are making too much of the word classy. But at the same time, I'm not going to be mad at a kid for having some fun on signing day. I think he has a right to do that.
Because, B.A., you can't wipe the smile. I couldn't slug the smile off this guy's face today. I understand it. And, yes, he is a young kid. But to me, I think, you thank everybody for the opportunity. I guess it's just a personality. I don't know.
Patrick Ernie Axley Jr. says Pruitt's going to make him pay for that when the Vols play Georgia, ... You watch. It is kind of funny here. You can really make a case that the Tennessee-Georgia rivalry has been ratcheted up here because with Walker doing what he did, don't forget Cade Mays is from Knoxville. Now, he didn't throw Tennessee hats, but he certainly broke some Tennessee hearts. When he left his hometown, his legacy, his dad played at Tennessee, and to come down to Georgia, I would imagine Vols have a little extra hatred for Georgia these days.
Well, I don't think it's only that. I look at it, and I have 2 guys that I played for, and Jeremy Pruitt and Kirby Smart that are good friends. I mean, these 2 guys know each other extremely well. Now they will be battling it out in terms of the SEC East, and Jeremy Pruitt obviously not getting to the level of Kirby Smart just yet, but you have to believe, even with the letdowns on signing day, I have to believe that Tennessee is building towards something recruiting-wise.
Diedrich Frazier says they should put Quay Walker at quarterback after that throw. That's kind of an interesting comment. Let's dive in a little bit more of Georgia talk here and the rest of the SEC with our first and 10 on SEC Country Live, and we'll keep sprinkling your comments. And, today we'll take comments off the subject. We'll just kind of do it all. We'll squeeze it all in here over the course of our time here together. But topic number 1 on our list, it was a monster haul for Georgia. Quay Walker, a big part of that. Otis Reese, the Michigan commit, Michigan's only top 100 commit, flips from Michigan to Georgia. And also the 5-star cornerback, Tyson Campbell from down in American Heritage High School in Plantation, Florida. He made his announcement of the Dogs earlier. Take a look at Campbell choosing UGA. So this is also one of those TV ceremonies. Campbell sitting next to Patrick Surtain. Here's his announcement.
I'll be attending the University of Georgia.
So Campbell also going all black there with the Georgia G. And Georgia, I think when the numbers are crunched here, given all the names that I just mentioned, including the 4-star wide receiver Tommy Bush, who we'll hear more from later on the show, Georgia probably going to have the #1 class in the country according to the 24/7 Sports Composite Team ranking. And when you start adding up those total numbers, the individual prospects get their individual score, adding those up, Georgia's going to be right there among the very best classes of all time, if not the very best class in what we think of as kind of the internet 24/7 rivals era.
It's definitely it's incredible. I mean, it's a legendary class. There's no other way to kind of compute that or talk about that. And you talk about the guys, not only the guys they signed that were 5-star, but positions of need. I mean, you needed a corner. If you're Georgia and you're Kirby Smart trying to get to the next level defensively, you need linebackers that can run sideline to sideline. You got guys like that today in Otis Reese and Quay Walker. So these weren't only good players; these are good players at positions where Georgia really needed to improve in the years to come. And I think Kirby Smart is absolutely salivating over what he sees on this National Signing Day list.
And if you're an Alabama fan, you should almost take it as a compliment here in that, Georgia views itself as needing virtually a perfect roster to knock off Alabama, right? I mean, the Georgia roster that played Alabama in 2017 is pretty good. Not a perfect roster, but Alabama has been for years and years, been #1 in the country for every year going back to 2010. Alabama has been almost a perfect roster and, 4- and 5-star guy, 3 deep at every single position. If you're going to beat Alabama, that's what it takes, and that's what Georgia's trying to do here. Georgia is going to have the #1 overall class. They are going to be, maybe eventually, by a composite rating, the most talented team in the SEC, but it takes every one of these 4- and 5-star guys to knock off Alabama because of the stockpile of talent that Nick Saban has put into that program.
Yeah, I mean, you put this program in Georgia right now with this signing class back to back with what Alabama did last year, and you obviously, a lot of people saw up close and personal what Alabama had on the field in the national championship game. That was what that signing class looked like. I think that Georgia fans look at this year's class and think maybe they could pull off the same thing. But you're right. And I've talked about it before. You have to have the 3 components if you're going to go out and win a championship. You have to be able to develop these guys. You have to have the on-field coaching, and you have to recruit. So Georgia fans can definitely feel like they're marking off at least 2 of the things on that list moving forward for the next few years.
Brooks Glanton is a great viewer of our program. He's an Alabama fan. He says, "BA, happy for you." But then he goes on to say, "I guess all that recruiting you've been doing every day here at 2 p.m. Central Time has paid off, but Roll Tide rolling in the way and catch me in the playoffs." I'd love to be able to take some credit for what Georgia's been able to do here. I don't know that my work on SEC Country Live has necessarily done that, but I'd love to think it would have helped, but I'm not quite so sure that it did.
Yeah, if we're helping recruiting, but I need to get the office a little earlier for the
But
for
I
the
do love Brooks. Brooks is a great Alabama fan. He kind of gives me a little bit of grief in the comment section. That's always a lot of fun to see. And you know what? Georgia obviously hopes it is catching Alabama in the playoffs once again, or the SEC championship game maybe in December, because as I said, that's what they're obviously trying to do.
I do want to touch on this too about Otis Reese, because you mentioned that he flipped from Michigan. Michigan just absolutely fell flat on Michigan. I mean, you remember when they had their bowl practice at Nicholas Petit Friere's high school. Over the bowl season. He goes to Ohio State. He goes to Ohio State of all places. Michigan had a tough day.
Yeah, tough. Joshua Finch says, "Great job finishing, Georgia, but you're still not Bama. We can pass in the #1 class at least 1 year in the decade." If you're an Alabama fan, do you feel that way today? That, it was a streak that was bound to come to an end at some point in time? Is that the way that you feel here on this?
Yeah, I don't think, listen, when we won a national title when I was a senior, I think we had one #1 class. I don't think, Bama shouldn't be in any panic mode right now, but I don't think I want to take away from what Georgia did, because it was a legendarily historic recruiting class. And a recruiting class like this, you don't worry about missing one, but if you do get one, well, you really got to feel like things are ratcheting up.
Our buddy Shannon Burgess in the comment section a moment ago admitted that he feels devastated today. He's an LSU fan. Let's make that the subject along with Alabama. Item number 2 here on SEC Country Live, our first and 10 list. And the guy that was sitting next to Tyson Campbell in the video we just played was the 5-star cornerback, his teammate, believe it or not, Patrick Surtain Jr. And there had been debate about, would Surtain, who had been thought to be an LSU lean, go to LSU? Could Alabama work in, get him? It's not a flip because Surtain was uncommitted, but could Alabama kind of get in there and rest him away at the last minute? Well, we found out this morning when Surtain made his announcement what his college choice was going to be. Take a look.
Good morning, everybody. This has been a tough process, but first off, I would like to thank God for all the blessings He gave me throughout this tough process. And I would like to thank my family, friends, and supporters for guiding me into making the right decision. And for the next 3 to 4 years, I'll be furthering my education at the University of Alabama.
So Surtain made his choice there. It was Alabama. This was a player, I think you even said this on Twitter today, Mike. it's unusual for Alabama to need a player.
Yes.
Alabama needed Surtain.
They
Now, LSU, I guess you would say that they needed him too, but that's a strong pitch from Alabama. Come here, play right away. I know that the brand new special teams coach had tweeted out something today about all the freshmen that Alabama played. Yeah, Jeff Banks, all the freshmen that played for Alabama in 2017. So obviously a message they wanted to get out there to Surtain and others that freshmen can come here and play. It's a huge win for Alabama. It's a devastating loss for LSU. We have fans of both teams watching right now. Put it in perspective for us.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of Alabama fans, I don't want to go too far down that road, but if you don't get Surtain, you do start to not panic about this class, but you don't feel very good about it. Surtain is a position of need. You didn't get a ton of corners last year. You got a couple of corners in the early signing period, in Savion Smith, Josh Jobe, that you feel good about. But Surtain is the guy that can get on the field next year and line up physically across the field from a lot of wide receivers you're going to see in the SEC. I think he plays right away. I'd be shocked if he's not given a shot at a starting role in this defensive backfield. I think Nick Saban can send this guy to the next level being inside of this program. I think if you don't get him, and that follows up Bobby Brown flipping to Texas A&M, that follows up another couple of losses that Alabama took today, boy, you don't feel good about the class. But with Surtain on board, you do feel like this can be a good year for Alabama recruiting-wise.
Ryan Mel kind of made the same point. He said Surtain was certainly a good get for Alabama, but they definitely took some L's today.
Yeah.
I think that's the point you're just making there, that without Surtain, you're hard-pressed to find a big win for Alabama today.
Yeah, it was tough. Justin Ross was a guy a lot of people felt like might have been an Alabama lean. He heads out of state. Only the third guy in the last 20 years that'll leave the state of Alabama as the #1 player in Alabama. He heads to Clemson. That was a big loss for them. They get a guy in Eddie Smith they were really high on, but Bobby Brown, the first guy in the morning, flips to Texas A&M. Jimbo Fisher gets a big win there. So there were some ups and downs for sure today. I don't think Alabama got their hands on everybody they wanted. Surtain definitely ends up being the real jewel of the signing class today.
And if you follow Chris Kirshner, who covers Alabama recruiting for SEC Country, he's going to tell you that Alabama's right back in the mix for the #1 class again in 2019, that the attrition with coaches hurt them in 2018. But I think for Alabama, who'll certainly try to spin this as not that big of a deal, I think that in terms of competing for national championships, you've got to stay in that sort of like that top 3 threshold, continually for year over year to do that. Now, Alabama can absorb some this because of the fact they're going to put good classes sort of in front of this and behind this. But this is definitely below the threshold of sort of the typical national championship type class. Certainly the kind they've been building before. I mean, this is a bit of an L taken for Alabama today.
Well, it is, and I think you're still going to see that, top 8, top 7, but it's definitely not top 3. And Alabama fans have grown accustomed to this. I think you can get into a national title game being, having a top 8 class somewhere down the line after you've signed #1 classes for the last few years before that. But I think you felt really comfortable about a lot of these guys. Now you look, Malik Langham's going to be coming up here in a couple of seconds. He's going to be announcing he's a Florida lean now. A lot of people felt good about Alabama getting him. So some of these guys that Jacob Copeland's another one of those guys. Alabama really went after some of these guys at the last minute and just didn't seem to be able to hit on any of these guys except Surtain.
Cliff Nelson, who's an LSU fan, says that he thinks Surtain changed his mind last night. We'd heard some of this about Tyson Campbell too, that Alabama was trying to make it very, very hard late for both of these two cornerbacks. Do you think it did come down to a last-minute decision for Surtain, who's another guy that I have to admit I was a little skeptical of his quote from yesterday that he had not made up his mind yet? I wasn't so sure I believed him when he said that he was too big of a prospect to be undecided, but maybe Cliff is right. Maybe it was an undecided situation where he did decide there at the last minute. Maybe that's truly what this was.
If he had gone to LSU, then I would say, he probably he knew he was going to go to LSU for a couple months. But the fact that he did flip to Alabama leads me to believe that it was an 11th hour type decision. Mm-hmm. You've heard all about Surtain in LSU. He's been an LSU lean. He has family in Louisiana. For him to make that decision to go to Alabama, I have to believe that he was completely torn. I think there's a lot of inter-family workings where there's a lot of people that had different opinions on everything.
Brian Silvesi in the comment section says, where's Florida going to be ranked? We're actually going to talk about the Gators here in just a moment. Before that, though, let me do a little bit more on the LSU part of this with the loss of Surtain. We'll talk about what they did get. They do get Jamar Chase, good-looking wide receiver. They obviously added Terrace Marshall, the 5-star, from back in the December period. I mean, how you feeling about Ed Orgeron right now? This was a guy they needed to get. I mean, how you feel about this?
Yeah, I think it's tough. I think they had an extremely tough day when you started going down the list. They lost Surtain. They lost James Foster. They lost Mario Goodrich to Clemson. They lost a guy like Glenn Beal, who's a guy out of Louisiana that was a 3-star tight end that Bama was in on and LSU were in on. He ends up going to Texas A&M, I believe. So there was prospects out there that all the LSU fans and Ed Orgeron felt really good about that just It's like, and we talk about Georgia in this way a lot, where they start to build momentum. Boy, LSU couldn't find any momentum today. It's like every decision that came down that LSU felt that they were in on just didn't fall their way, except for Jamar Chase obviously picking them in the end.
Chad Clark in the comment section says some of the issue may have been a miscommunication. Maybe some of the players didn't understand Ed Orgeron. They didn't realize they'd gotten a scholarship offer. When
don't pile on LSU. I think, listen, it's been tough. It's been a tough enough day for those LSU fans. I'm not going to pile on them. It's been a rough one for them, too.
That is certainly a fair point. Bo Molinari also talked about Texas A&M. We're going to chat up about the Aggies here in just a moment. I thought it was a big day for the Aggies. For now, let me move on to item number 3 here on our SEC Country Live First and 10 list. Obviously, American Heritage High School was busy all day today. We mentioned Surtain, we mentioned Tyson Campbell, also Andrew Chatfield, the 4-star linebacker. He chose the Florida Gators, got a prop involved in his decision. Let's show you Chatfield making his announcement a little earlier.
4 years. I'll be attending the University of...
Puts the Miami hat down. So, I don't understand this really. I guess it's like a Chucky doll. Like, look at that.
It's something Florida. I was trying to look this up today. I guess a few Florida signees in recent history have actually done this, and he was kind of following it.
All right, so we got a lot of Florida fans who watch our show every day. Would y'all mind explaining this? I told you,
please.
We're going to be very loose today. We're going to take a lot of comments. Some of y'all are going to get a chance to sort of direct the direction of the show. So Florida fans, sort of educate me a bit on this Chucky doll thing. I mean, first of all, I think Chatfield's a great gift for Florida.
A huge gift.
But I don't understand the Chucky doll.
No, I don't either. I was trying to look it up on Twitter. It was something about some other signees from the past have done this, the guys that were going to Florida. So I guess this was his way of saying, look, I'm going to Florida. Check this out.
Somebody in the comment section earlier also said, hey, you said Jacob Copeland wasn't coming to Florida. Say you're wrong about that. Okay, I will. I had assumed weeks ago, or at least a few days ago, that I didn't think that Copeland was going to be a part of this Florida class. They do get him, along with Chatfield. Miss out on Nicholas Petit-Frere. Miss out on Caleb Tanner goes to Nebraska.
Noah Boykin.
Noah Boykin chooses Notre Dame over Florida. Wearing like the Florida blue, still chose Notre Dame. How do you feel about Florida class right now?
It's been an up and down day, and obviously you guys will probably know before we do. Langham is set to choose here shortly. I think he was supposed to go on at 3:30 Eastern time to choose.
But don't be putting those false announcements in the comment section because we're going to check it before we say it anyway.
Please don't. Yeah,
don't be doing that kind of stuff. It just clouds up.
No trolls today. No,
it just clogs up the feed.
It's too much emotion going on to get trolled in the comment section today. It's going to be a big announcement, obviously, between Florida and Alabama. He's a Florida lean. So I think when you get down to it, you had a couple of tough losses early if you're a Florida fan, but they do. Jacob Copeland's a big get for them. Langham will be a big get for them. Richard Gurage, I'm not even sure how you say his name. I've been fumbling over that name for the last 2 weeks. He's another 4-star offensive tackle they're going to get out of Florida. So they're feeling decent about their class. It's a transition class. It's going to be a top 15 class. I don't know that it had the huge upside that Florida fans were probably wanting. It kind of goes along the lines with that Alabama class where you could have really hit home runs today, but you didn't, but you're still pretty good with where you're at.
Van Knight says Dante Fowler also did the Chucky thing at one point in time. I mean, listen, if that be the case, that's a pretty good guy to follow in the footsteps of. Fowler is obviously a really good player. Justin Sisk says, what do Florida and Chucky have in common? They ain't real. So, listen, obviously a lot of folks going to take some shots today, but you touched on something a moment ago, and I don't just mean this to pay lip service. I do mean this legitimately. While Florida is a long way away from its top East rival, Georgia, right now, it is going to be better than what Jim McElwain was in 2015, and that's probably a good thing if you're Dan Mullen. Now, it's really hard to go from like 11 through 15 to like 4. It's really hard to do that. Even with the in-state advantage that Florida has, it's hard to take that next step. But the first step for Mullen's going to be better than McElwain's first step was, and that's, I guess, something.
Yeah, no, I think, listen, you got to look for the product on the field, but I just don't foresee a Dan Mullen team. You look back at how Florida played against Missouri this past year. I mean, that was that's bad, and that's something that Florida fans aren't used to. And the season they had last year is something Florida fans aren't used to. So I think you can definitely, and I've mentioned this a ton in the last month. The arrow is still pointing up for Florida for me. They still close with some good names as far as recruiting goes, and I think Dan Mullen's just going to have to be one of those coaches that shows the product on the field and gets these recruits to buy in over the next year.
Diedrich Frazier, who's a Georgia fan, I think he summed this up pretty well. Georgia does great. Florida does well, or does good. Tennessee, not so much. And that, for me, is probably about the way I'd size up the SEC East. Georgia, you give them an A. Florida, you probably give them about a B. Tennessee,
Yeah, I think, listen, I think the West looks a lot like that as well. I think I think that, listen, A&M had a huge day. A&M got some guys that you didn't think A&M was in on. Auburn and Alabama, it's just kind of, ho-hum. We got some guys we thought we were going to get, got some guys we didn't. But LSU, it's like, you know what, you're not really feeling good about some of the things they put out there today.
Kenneth Scott also says Dominic Easley was one of the guys that started the Chucky tradition there. But, okay, so Easley's a very good player. Fowler's certainly a very good player. But what does it mean? It's one thing to say those guys did it.
idea.
But what does it mean? Like, what does it symbolize? I mean, that's what I sort of feel like I need to understand a little bit more. Jason Ford says, I'm not sure about the Chucky doll, but I can educate you on this. Georgia 2018 class is #1. Boy, a lot of Georgia fans feeling pretty good about themselves here today, which I guess I'm
sitting next to one of them, by the way.
No, I mean, listen. What do you say? It was a pretty good day. It was a pretty good day.
No, you should. Y'all, Georgia fans, listen. Today is your day. I'm not even going to try to beat around the bush as far as what happened today. It was a legendary class. I wrote on Twitter today. It was a fairy tale class.
Yeah, you did.
It was a fairy tale class for Georgia. I think if Kirby Smart could have gone in and said, I want our 2018 class to look like this, I don't think it would have looked a lot different than what actually happened. I think if he could have picked players out, obviously you want all the 5 stars, but if you could have picked players out and gone in positions of need, I think it would have looked a lot on paper like it ended up being today.
Also, in the comment section a little earlier, Trey Dukes was asking about another one of those cornerbacks we've talked about a lot here on this show, which is Isaac Taylor-Stewart. He's slated to make his announcement later on today. I don't think there's an SEC team still in the mix for Taylor Stewart. I mean,
I know Tennessee is gonna feel like they're in there right now. I don't know that he ends up at Tennessee. I think he kind of goes along the lines of Elijah Griffin earlier picked USC. I think Isaac Taylor-Stewart falls in.
I mean, to me, the SEC team that probably had the better chance of signing him when it's all said and done would have been A&M, but A&M lost Banks, the coach, who had the relationship with him. At that point in time, I think that Taylor Stewart was sort of, I mean, he's certainly enjoyed visiting these SEC teams, but it seems like he's USC bound.
Yeah, I think he's USC bound for sure.
By the way, speaking of the other USC here for a moment, South Carolina gets the big commitment from and signing from 4-star defensive tackle Rick Sandage from Concord, North Carolina. That's a good addition.
Yeah.
Muschamp made that a big-time priority. Muschamp was the lead recruiter on Sandage and gets the job done. Listen, and this is going to sound like more bragging on the part of Georgia, but I mean this legitimately. Not that many schools went head-to-head with Georgia this year and won.
Yeah.
South Carolina was one of them.
Yeah.
Went head-to-head with Georgia over Sandage. We played the video the other day of Georgia going in-home with him.
In his bedroom.
In his bedroom, and all the stops got pulled out. And Georgia couldn't beat out South Carolina for Sandage. Muschamp's a good recruiter.
This is another one of those I look at, and it goes right along the lines of what I was saying about Surtain earlier. This is one of those guys, you have to have the athletes inside. If you're Will Muschamp and you want to run a Will Muschamp style of defense, and you want South Carolina to get to the next level, it's got to start at positions, and it's got to start with guys like Rick Sandage. I think it's a huge get for South Carolina.
All right, you mentioned Texas A&M. Let's talk about Texas A&M just a little bit more here. Item number 4 here on our SEC Country Line, 1st and 10. You'll help me fill out all the names here who A&M adds today.
Yeah.
The one that jumps off the page for me first, though, is James Foster. I would say he's probably the top uncommitted quarterback coming into the day today. This is a guy that LSU was flirted with. Alabama had some relationship with, although it was sort of hard to figure out exactly how serious that ever got. I mean, he was a one-time Missouri commit. He's been offered by just about everybody. It's kind of a long, winding recruitment for Foster. He ends up at Texas A&M. This is probably below the threshold of the quarterback I expect Fisher to recruit in future years.
Yeah.
But in terms of this year, to kind of add him to what was already shaping up to be a pretty good class, I think Jimbo and the Aggies have done a really good job here.
James Foster is one of those guys where, a lot of guys weren't jumping on until the quarterback started getting soaked up in the early signing period. Then all of a sudden, everybody looked around and said, oh, man, I don't have a quarterback. I need to jump on one. And James Foster was getting pulled in every different direction. You had a ton of different programs, and that includes Florida State, includes, obviously, LSU. And Texas A&M to be able to jump out and get him. I thought A&M had a huge day. And it was like, we've been wondering where the 2018 A&M recruiting class would go. Obviously, a big deal for 2019. Jimbo's been picking up a lot of players, but man, you talk about going head-to-head with some teams and not being able to beat out Georgia this year. They went head-to-head with LSU today, FSU. They went head-to-head with Oklahoma on Tank Jenkins, the offensive lineman. They went head-to-head with Bama on Bobby Brown. They were able to
Leon O'Neal on that too.
Leon O'Neal,
he announced that's a guy that everybody
That's
wants.
a huge one. That's
Alabama
a huge, and those are head-up victories for Jimbo Fisher and Texas A&M, and we talk about momentum. Boy, you can feel that momentum really starting to build down in Texas
really and truly. By the way, to go back to another subject from a moment ago, Cliff Nelson says, here's a quote from Patrick Surtain. LSU, and I wouldn't normally not vet this quote, but I trust Cliff on this. He says, LSU was my school. Last night when I was thinking about this, I broke down in tears. That's how tough it was. That's Cliff Nelson attributing that quote to Patrick Surtain there. And honestly, listen, we have fun. We like the rivalry stuff. We like the who's up, who's down. We like all that. I do, in a way, kind of feel so. I mean, that's a tough thing because LSU would have been a great place to go.
Yeah.
And Alabama is a really good place to go. That's I almost feel for Surtain being sort of in the crosshairs the way that he is, because a lot of people are going to nitpick the decision that he made.
Yeah, and it's like I said yesterday, there's just not many people, when it comes down to making a business decision and a decision on your future, there's just not a lot of programs that can look at a member of the secondary, a cornerback in general, and say, man, we're putting out the same that Alabama has been doing for the last 10 years at corner. LSU is one of those teams, so it had to have been a tough decision. It doesn't come down to, oh, my heart's here, but I'm making a decision for my future, or vice versa. Boy, he really had to sit down and make a tough one. And I think his dad came out with some comments afterwards too, that if his kid likes it, boy, I love it, and I think that's the most special part.
Greg Steele, who's a Florida fan, was kind of going back at somebody who said that Florida was going to be 4th in the East for 2018. He says, only 4th. Who's going to be 2nd or 3rd? Do you have Florida as the biggest competitor to Georgia right now? Because I probably don't. I probably have South Carolina.
I'm big on Florida this year.
Okay.
I know that there's still so many unknowns. We're in February right now. It's it's signing day, but I'm a huge believer in Dan Mullen. I think that you've started to see those two kind of Florida and Dan Mullen. They were separate things 2 months ago, and I think you've started to see really those two mesh together. I can't wait to see what happens with Florida in spring practice as far as his quarterback position goes. But I'm telling you. And I've been alluding to this for the last month. I'm really high on what's building at Florida right now. I think they're going to be able to do some special things this year.
Clarence McDonald, speaking of Florida, says they're going to be much better than people are giving them credit.
I agree.
Look what Mullen did with 3 stars when Urban Meyer was there. Remember, Percy Harvin was a 3-star recruit. That's what Clarence McDonald says there. And Mullen obviously was recruiting less than 4- and 5-star guys at Mississippi State. But he's also not judged by how much you beat LSU and Alabama. He beat them some. But at a place like Florida, you're supposed to go head-to-head with those programs and win the majority of those games against those teams, which you're only going to do with 4- and 5-star players. I mean, it is an absolute fairy tale to say you're going to build a big winner anywhere with a majority 3-star roster.
Listen,
not going to do that.
I'm really high on Dan Mullen, but I'm pretty sure Percy Harvin was the #1 recruit in the country.
I don't know.
I'm pretty sure that Percy Harvin,
Clarence McDonald
Tim
said.
Tebow, I'm pretty sure
he's 5-star.
I'm pretty sure that he was the #1 recruit in the country.
You know what? You got Mike over here fact-checking the comment section. Let the guy have his point.
I'm just saying that. Listen, he did a lot with a lot of talent down there, and I think Florida's building towards something. But you have to get the talent in there. He's not going to do it with 3 stars. With the roster that Georgia's putting together and what you think that Pruitt might be able to put together in the near future, 3 stars, I'm sorry. You can have all the coach in the world. It's just not going to get it done. At some point, Dan Mullen is going to have to recruit. I thought he got some wins today, but this is a big class in 2019. One
of the guys at one point in time was a Florida commit, but flipped away from the Gators. This actually ends up being good news for LSU. It's the topic of item number 5 here, or topic number 5 here on our SEC Country Live 1st and 10 list. That's Jamar Chase, the wide receiver who is really one of the more interesting recruiting stories of the last 12 months. A guy that was going to make his announcement on the NFL Network at one point in time, postponed his decision. Now I guess the choice may end up being different than it was going to be then. Maybe at the time it would have been TCU, was a Florida commit, but picks LSU today over Auburn. His final 2 had been LSU and Auburn. This is another example of something that LSU seems to do every single year, both in the December recruiting cycle and now in the February recruiting cycle, adding really good wide receivers. I think Chase is a good-looking player based on what you can see from him on film, and I do think this is a good pickup for LSU. And I never thought Auburn was going to actually win this one out, but it is an example of a battle that LSU sort of takes head-to-head against Auburn.
Boy, I think I speak for LSU fans here, and I feel comfortable doing this out loud on the show. You had to have Jamar Chase.
Yeah.
I mean, you just had to have Jamar Chase today. Not only did LSU miss out on some of their top options, but they missed out on some of the backup options. And I mentioned Glenville earlier. You talked about another guy in Justin Watkins. They missed out, obviously, on Mario Goodrich and James Foster and Patrick Surtain. So Jamar Chase coming in and kind of being, I guess crown jewel is the right word for this next signing period, signing day number 2 of the 2018 period. You had to have him. And Jamar Chase, to me, is one of these guys that can get on the field early. We've talked a ton about the passing game down at LSU. You have to have guys like this who have the playmaking ability. If any of these quarterbacks on the roster are going to get LSU to the next level, you have to have wide receivers out wide like this. So huge get, obviously, for LSU.
James Crump also reminding us in terms of what LSU sort of missed out on. Mario Goodrich, who ends up at Clemson. That's a guy that had been kind of bouncing around a couple of SEC teams here as of late. That's another one of those guys that could have filled that defensive back void a bit, but he ends up going to Clemson instead of LSU. By the way, it's just coming in here. Malik Langham, who has been one of those prospects that's really been kind of at the center of the conversation here of the last few days. Just chose the Florida Gators. That's a nice addition there for Florida.
That's a big one. And like you said, that was somebody that Alabama wanted. That's somebody that Nick Saban went out and said, we want Malik Langham right out of their backyard. He's able to head down to Florida. And obviously, he was high on that program. I think this is a shocker for some people because he actually left Florida and still had Alabama as his leader after his official visit. And obviously they did enough here at the 11th hour to flip.
That's a really good point to bring up.
Yeah.
That if you can withstand the official visit, you usually stay in good shape. But some remnants of that kind of work on the big defensive end here.
And I feel the same way about him that I do Rick Sandage. If you're going to have, if you're going to continue to be a dominant defensive front, and Florida's, we know all about Florida's defenses historically, this is another nice piece that you can kind of put up front for Florida right now and feel like you can go up against some of the better offensive lines in the country for the next couple of years.
To me, this feels like what we liked about the Jeff Collins era, and you and I were both fans of Collins, the Florida defensive coordinator. Langham feels like one of those guys that kind of fits into that just a bit. Tough to run on, a defense that's going to, remember, go back to 2015. Florida in 2015 had more than 40 sacks. That's a
insane
huge
amount.
It's a huge sack number for Florida going back that far. They obviously want to get back to that. Langham's a step in that direction.
Langham's a step in that direction. I mentioned Justin Watkins a minute ago, who did not go to LSU, that LSU had been looking at a little bit, and he's another one of those guys that's a very highly thought of 4-star prospect that's going to be back in the secondary, and he goes along the lines of some of those corners you've seen. Being able to really lock down the edge has been something we've seen from Florida in the last few years. Boy, he's a big piece too.
Kyle Jarrett says, he's speaking from an LSU fan's perspective, Jamar Chase was the only bright spot of the day. I'm excited to see him alongside Terrace Marshall as long as Miles Brennan can get it done. That's the point I think we need to build to here. The presence of Marshall, who LSU's already signed, the addition of Jamar Chase here today, how much easier does that make life on Miles Brennan? I'll also add Lowell Narcisse's name into that discussion as well. How much easier does it become for those guys when you add more elite wide receivers here to the class of 2018?
It's huge because you look at guys like that and you think rangy. I mean, these guys are rangy. You don't have to have these quarterbacks that can fit it into a window this big because you're not dealing with wide receivers that are 5'8". That's really a lot of times in the SEC, if you want to get to the next level and you have a quarterback that might struggle a little bit with accuracy, you have to have rangy wide receivers. I saw it personally when Julio Jones showed up on campus in 2008. Boy, I mean, this guy could go all over. It was like, it was like throwing a football at a soccer net. He could go out and get it anywhere. This is kind of what you're getting along those lines with these guys that are long, big wingspan, rangy type of players at the wide receiver position.
Cliff Nelson says Miles Brennan's going to be throwing the ball all around the yard next year. So that's an LSU fan who's excited about seeing that. Obviously, using those wide receivers to do just that. We'll get more of your comments in the comments section. We'll continue to hit a lot of this here. By the way, Cliff also saying that Steve Ensminger's going to have to run a 4 wide receiver up-tempo attack like Brennan did in high school in order to capitalize on the wide receivers that we have. And I think that's kind of the point here as well, that LSU fans have been kind of wanting to see it move towards this. What Matt Canada was supposed to be, getting away from what had been the hallmark of the Cam Cameron era there as LSU offensive coordinator. I mean, maybe this does sort of grease the wheels for something like that to happen.
Yeah, I think that you look at it, and I can't help but wonder. And I don't want to insult LSU fans. Obviously, I said it's been a tough day, but does this become a serious transition year as far as the offense goes? We talked about the offensive line. You're going to have some talent at wide receiver, but obviously Darius Geis is missing in the backfield. You got a new quarterback. You got a new offensive coordinator. How quickly can Steve Ensminger put those pieces together and get the talent on the field? That's going to be the big question for LSU's offense moving forward this year. Can they get those guys that were freshman offensive linemen last year to really step up in some of those positions? And what is the offense going to look like? I mean, that's the big question. What is this offense going to look like under Steve Ensminger? I haven't seen it. Obviously, we have some inklings as to what it might do, but you have to believe that these young, talented wide receivers are going to be on the field at some point in a big role this year.
Julie Craig asking an interesting question. Clarification of the rule about signing only 25 guys. She says ESPN's reporting that Texas has 26. Right now, I guess, by the letter of the law, Georgia's also got 26 as well. My understanding is, and y'all can correct me in the comment section if I'm wrong, the truth is there's a very good chance that I am. The 25 hard cap is an SEC thing. It used to be that you could back count early enrollees towards last year's total if you signed fewer than 25, which gave the chance of signing like 28, 29 guys. The SEC is not allowing its teams to do that anymore. That's a hard rule. So that's obviously complicating things here in the SEC just a little bit. Am I getting this right?
Here's what I think you're going to see some massaging of the numbers. Alabama did this last year. We have a couple of guys out there that, maybe you have a guy that's rehabbing from an injury. Maybe you had a guy that tore his ACL his senior year. You can blue shirt or gray shirt some of these guys. Delay their enrollment. Either blue shirt them and they can enroll. They're just not part of the football team, or they get gray shirt and they don't enroll till next spring. You can massage those numbers a little bit if you have one guy that's willing to take that on.
Mark Lee also says that you can back count 5, so that allows for schools to sign more than 25. And I actually read something like that at dognation.com a minute ago as well. But That's the first I've heard of that. I mean,
Yeah,
I've been
that's
hearing
first I've
the
heard of that,
entire
too.
time that it was hard count of 25. And look, the truth is, I don't know. I don't have any idea. I mean,
I would love. I mean, it's not like I haven't looked into it. I just get 5 different answers from 5 different sources when it comes to the 25 hard count.
So,
by the way, I hate that rule. I absolutely hate
I think
the
it's so
25
unfair.
hard count.
Especially they're going to, and I think you brought this up the other day. If you're going to change the transfer rule when the coaches get fired, you got to give me the chance to sign more than 25 guys. Otherwise, I can never get my roster back up to 85.
You're never going to get to 85 at that point with some of these groups.
So the overall point here is, I'd love to be able to be the host that can sit here and tell you everything that you don't already know. But if I can't be that, at least I'm honest enough to admit what I don't know. I mean, listen, I'll spew opinions left and right, but when I don't know something, I'm fairly quick to sort of say I didn't know.
I think we're all on board with the BA. You're the host with the most, man.
Thank you. I appreciate that. All right, let me go away from recruiting here for just a couple of topics, and then we'll get back to signing day here in just a moment. It's item number 6 here on our SEC Country Live, 1st and 10. So it became official this week that Washington has added former Georgia quarterback Jacob Eason. Eason was the one-time Gatorade Player of the Year, started for Georgia for the full 2016 season, gets hurt the first game of 2017. The rest with Jake Fromm, as they say, is history. Washington excited to have him. They released this video in honor of him. You can take a look at this right now. We'll kind of show you some of it. Jacob Eason being celebrated. You get the Seattle stuff here at the beginning. We won't show you the whole thing. It's pretty long. But clearly they're excited enough about Eason that they're kind of getting excited about this, kind of showing the video here. In a minute they're going to get some of his high school highlights there. And, this is going to be kind of an interesting crossroads for Georgia. They assume with Fromm, last year's starter, and as you see Eason right there, back from his high school days at Lake Stevens, which is near the Washington campus. Georgia assumes it's going to be just fine without him. How do you think Eason's going to do out west?
I think he's going to do fine. I do. It's a little bit of a head scratcher for me that he's going to Washington. You're talking about a program that already has their quarterback returning for this year. You're talking about a team that signed a couple of good quarterbacks in the future. So, it would be a shame to Jacob Eason to show up in Washington and the transfer rule gets completed to where you can transfer without having to sit out, but yet he has to sit out anyways under another quarterback that's starting in front of him. The Washington thing's a head scratch for me, but I'll tell you this much. I will always be a fan of Jacob Eason. I think Georgia fans should feel the same way. The way he handled everything that went down this year and the way he did it with class and was never outspoken about, trying to get his position back or anything like that. I'm a huge fan of his moving forward.
Yeah, and I think I won't pretend to know what's inside of his head here, but I think when you've had a tough experience, and the Georgia experience was tough. He handled it with first class. I think Georgia, for the most part, did everything it could to sort of, help him get to where he wanted to go. But it's a tough experience, right?
Yeah.
You lost a job you thought was yours. So sometimes the only way to feel better about that is to go home. I love the I'm going home music there. I mean, sometimes getting back closer to home is just a way to sort of say, I'm going to have to compete for a job wherever I go. At least I'm doing this one back very near where I grew up with fans that maybe sort of appreciate me as the hometown guy. Whereas with Georgia, there was always going to be a little bit of, Fromm's the guy from like Houston County. You could not get more Georgia than Jake Fromm. Whereas Jacob Eason, you at times couldn't get less Georgia than him.
Yeah, I don't know, and I'm not going to sit here and pretend. You just mentioned ago, I'm not going to pretend to know something I don't. I don't know all the quarterback situations out in the the Pac-12, but I guess I just wish that Jacob Eason would have landed somewhere that if the transfer rule does go through, that we could have seen him on the field next year. I think he's that kind of talent to where, given a little bit of time to develop into a system, I think he can be a dynamic passer.
Jay Johnson changed the subject in the comment section, says to reference the Quay Walker video from a little earlier. The Jacob Copeland video from a little earlier says same thing happened to Landon Collins. His mom was mad that he came to Alabama. These kids need support. No matter where they decide to go, we should support them. We're all made our own decisions how our life would play out. Proud of you, Jacob, even though you didn't come to Alabama. So that's kind of well said there by Jay Johns with the support for Copeland. I got to admit something, and I hope I can explain this the right way. People say it's the kid's decision. If you think I'd let my kid make a decision like that on his own, you were crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm going to try to explain this the right way. I sort of side with the parents on this just a little bit in terms of, this is a big decision, maybe sometimes adult from the perspective of wisdom earned through years, can see things the kid can't. I mean, I'd have a real problem, too, if my son was going to choose to go play football at a place that I didn't think was best for him. Now, hopefully I don't storm off the set. I mean, hopefully I handle it a little bit differently. But I'm not completely dumbfounded by Copeland's mom's decision. If she thinks it's wrong to go to Florida, I'm not completely dumbfounded by her showing some exasperation about that because, I mean, I do think that parents have a right to weigh in on this.
Yeah, and you don't ever know the inner workings of it. I think that's the tough thing when you look at it, and we have such a small amount of information about really what's going on. I mean, you could have had Jacob Copeland come back from his official at Florida and been like, man, I'm going there because the party scene's great. And then she's like, no, you don't need to do that. You need to go. So you never know the inner workings. But I will say this, and this comes from the player perspective, not the parent perspective. I just feel like she has to back him up no matter what. I disagree with it, but storming off the set to me was a little bit over the top.
Completely understand that. But I think the point I'm trying to make here is, if my son was going to make a college decision that I thought was really wrong for him, and by the way, most college decisions are not that high stakes. You go to the wrong school, just transfer somewhere else, right?
Yeah.
I mean, if you're just a student, it doesn't really matter. You can go to 15 colleges. But when you go to a SEC school to play football, you got an NFL future at stake. You got a lot of things riding on it. There's potentially millions of dollars on the line here. I mean, I would feel a certain sense of exasperation if I thought my son was making the wrong choice or making the right choice for the wrong reason.
Yeah, and listen, I tried to talk about this on Dog Nation today when I was on with you earlier. This is not just like, this is where I'm going to play football. You are completely changing the lives of not just yourself, but your entire family. I mean, these parents, these uncles, these cousins, they're all going to be traveling to these games for the next 4 years. Their fandoms are all going to change for the next 4 years and beyond. You are moving cities and completely moving your life down to Gainesville, Florida. So it's not just, oh man, I want to go wear the orange and blue. It's a completely different life-changing decision.
Bo Molinari is 100% right, though. Mom needs to support the son's decision publicly, be critical behind closed doors. That's the decent thing to do, and Bo's right about that.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And obviously, I don't have kids. I've never had to go on that road before, but I felt the same way about the Landon Collins thing. I feel like you just have to support, and you can't have a public display, especially on national television.
Let's do item number 7 here in our SEC Country Live, 1st and 10. As Alabama drops some news here, at least there's a report of some news. Kind of curious timing here, coming up the night before signing day on Wednesday. But the Birmingham News, AL.com, Matt Zenitz, the writer, lets us know that co-defense coordinator and outside linebackers coach Tosh Lapoy expected to be promoted to defensive coordinator and play caller, according to sources. Now, on the one hand, it's not that big of a deal to me because this is what I always thought was going to happen. Any curiosity about the timing of it happening the night before signing day?
I can't. I think it's very curious, but I can't really develop in my own mind what the benefit would be of holding it out till the night before signing day. I guess you can tell a kid maybe somebody else is getting that role, but I think that the benefit would have been Tosh Lapoy's an ace recruiter. The benefit would have been announcing a week ago that Tosh Lapoy is going to be the defense coordinator.
I'm sorry, I kind of changed the subject for 5 seconds.
Man, you got
Chris Smith is giving me a hard time in the comment section. He says, because earlier I sort of defended Quay Walker for throwing the Tennessee hat, and then I just sort of defended. I didn't defend Copeland's mom. I said I sort of understand where she's coming from. He says, Chris Smith in the comment section, so come on, BA, a kid can't throw a hat, but an adult can storm off. Well, first of all, I defended Walker for throwing the hat. I don't have a problem with him doing that.
I was the one that had a problem.
Yeah, and when it comes to the storming off, I don't condone her storming off. I'm just saying I sort of know the underlying feeling.
Right.
That's all I'm saying. I'm not condoning her storming off. That's a bad look, and I think even she will probably regret it when she goes back and sees it on video. This is Jacob Copeland's mother I'm discussing here. But I sort of understand the feelings that would motivate that. That's my only point.
Yeah, and it's like I said, I don't have children, so I don't pretend to come from that angle. But I do wish she would have supported him definitely on air. You're on national television on ESPN announcing where you're going to go to school, and it should be a happy day, and it just wasn't for her.
Back to Tosh Lapoy here for a moment, though. At least according to AL.com, the guy that's expected to be the Alabama defensive coordinator. As we said, we've assumed this was going to be the guy, and Alabama went very high profile for its last defensive coordinator hire. Kirby Smart leaves. You take Jeremy Pruitt from Georgia, who had been at Florida State. That was sort of like the era of like the big name coordinator hire. John Chavis goes to Texas A&M. Pruitt changes schools. Even Muschamp had been a high profile defensive coordinator there for a minute. Lapoy has a much lower profile, but he's thought to be a very good recruiter, and he's thought to be very much cut from the Nick Saban mold. I'm assuming this is not a blip on the radar. I'm assuming they don't skip a beat, that Lapoy is just the very next in line of very good Alabama defensive coordinators. Is there any reason why that might not be the case?
No, but I do want to draw my attention to something else in the storyline. Both of these coordinators are promoted from within, which I think says a lot about what Nick Saban's doing right now. I think he's trying to get on track where we're not going year to year at Alabama and these guys are leaving the building.
Loxley and Lapoy.
I think Loxley and Lapoy both promoted from within. I feel like Nick Saban is like, hey, listen, we need to keep these guys around for a little bit and not have the coordinators leaving every year.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of an interesting point. The Loxley thing, I will point out, I mean, when Dan Enos comes over as the quarterbacks coach, I mean,
both a lot to do with recruiting. Both of those hires have a ton to do with recruiting. I think Loxley was all about recruiting, and definitely probably Tosh too.
But I mean, that's one of the things that I referenced before from Chris Kirshner, who covers Alabama recruiting for SECCountry.com, that the lack of relationships because coaches left hurt Alabama for 2018. And you just said it, you got to keep some guys in the staff for a while in order to sort of replenish those relationships going forward. Lapoy is thought to be a really good recruiter. I mean, if he didn't become Alabama defensive coordinator, he'd have his choice of DC at really any other place. I mean, this will be a very hot commodity here, but it is a lower profile defensive coordinator we're used to seeing in Alabama. From that standpoint, Loxley, to the extent that he's got full control of the Alabama offense, is a little lower profile we've seen from Alabama in a while too.
Yeah, it's like I said, I think that Nick Saban went complete recruiting with this. I really both these moves to me have recruiting written all over, and I think both guys are quality coaches. Don't let me take away from them, but I think that Nick sees how hard it has been to really deal with a lot of the turnover in the coaching staff for the last few years. I mean, you've had coaches in, coaches out. You know, you've had at least a handful of coaches leaving after every season for the last few years. It seems like Nick Saban tried to hire young and tried to hire from within to try to cut some of that off.
All right, Chad Clark in the comment section. This is an important thing to bring up here because he's not the only one who's saying this. That apparently Copeland's mom did come back on set and hug her son, like what Cliff Nelson's saying was like 45 seconds later. So I didn't see that part of the video. I only saw the part that we showed here. So I guess you got to give her a little bit of credit, but that's still making her into a pretty big spectacle.
Well, you know, I got to admit, at first when I looked at it, I thought, man, you know, maybe there's something going on, and she had to go ahead and get off the set. But if you notice, Jacob Copeland never even looks at her.
She had a doctor's appointment.
I don't know. It's like he never even looks at her. So to me, it was almost like he expected it. Like he was like, yeah, she's
here it is again. So we don't have the part where she comes back. Maybe someone does have that on social media. Maybe we can find that for later on.
He just kind of looks down at her feet like, oh, yeah, she's doing what I thought she would do. And
that is a very interesting point. And listen, body language sometimes can be misleading. But there is really nobody on this set who's surprised by this really at all. And that part is kind of weird, right? I mean, if the mom was getting up and leaving in the middle of a... I mean, what if I got up and left in the middle of the show? I mean, think about what the look on you.
All right, see you later.
Hey, you have a big smile on your face. Probably it's like, finally we can have some fun around here. That moron who sits next to me. But if I get up and walk off the set, you're going to look, it's like, what's going on here? Nobody...
Only the guy to the right was like, well, I'm not sure what's going on here. Everybody else is
nobody else really even looks at it at all. I mean, could this possibly have been some sort of pre-planned thing? And what did she get out of that?
She might have told him before, listen, if you pick Florida, I'm getting off the set right now. I don't want any part of it. And I would assume that's probably what happened because look at him. He's like, yeah, okay, there she goes.
So she got the Tennessee hat on, the Florida shirt on, I mean the Alabama shirt on. Did she just hate Florida that bad that it's like anybody but Florida?
Listen, if I knew the information, I'd be putting it out there right now. I have no idea. But there's got to be a story behind it, and I think it'll for sure come out. Well, listen, I'm sure a week from now, that'll be topic number one on SEC Country.
We'll just roll right on, brand new news cycle. We'll cover every twist and turn of it as it takes place. All right, let me do item number 8. We're running a little late here, so let me see if I can get caught up here. Kind of an interesting story for item number 8 in that the top player in the state of Alabama, Justin Ross, top wide receiver, ends up not staying in state, goes out of state, goes to Clemson instead. Now, Clemson's made a lot of hay doing this lately, going into other states, getting the top players. I mean, poor Tennessee, for instance.
I don't want to misquote about the Clemson right now, but I think they got 6 players that were number 1 in their state.
Yeah,
this recruiting
that's
side.
what they've been doing.
Something insane.
They killed it in like Tennessee last year. Now I guess Trey Smith would have been the overall top player. They get T. Higgins out of there. I mean, you're going to count, technically you're going to count Trevor Lawrence as the top player in the state of Georgia. So they get him from Georgia. This is what Clemson does.
Kid out of Ohio. I mean, they went to Ohio State's backyard and got the number 1 player out of Ohio.
So they get Justin Ross from Alabama. And for me, this is more of a bad on Auburn than bad on Alabama. The truth is, Alabama's got 9,000 wide receivers. I never thought of Ross as a real Alabama guy anyway. But should Auburn done a little bit better here?
I think so. I don't think it's a make or break prospect. I think Auburn still has a ton of talent at wide receiver as well. I think that Alabama wanted to land a wide receiver.
Yeah, they got Anthony Schwartz, who's a speedy kid from down in Florida.
Yeah, they did. Oh, yeah, track star.
Hill, the kid from suburban Atlanta. Is it Matthew Hill from Brookwood?
Matthew Hill, yeah.
So they did okay at the receiver position, but how about you get the number one player in your staff?
They had some nice pieces. I mean, Quintus Miller's a nice piece. Richard Jabuner, obviously Harold Joyner's a guy who could. The running back class was great at Auburn this year. I think they got 3 really quality running backs that'll be the crown jewel of their class. But you have to think that they would have turned some heads had they landed Justin Ross. I think that, getting him out of their backyard, I'm not sure where he's from, Opelika or something like that down there right around Auburn. So it would have been a nice piece. I don't think it's make or break from Auburn, but, good for him going to Clemson.
Omid Paul Bahraini, I hope I pronounced your name correctly, Omid. I apologize if I did not. He wants to talk about Arkansas. We'll do that in a minute. We did talk about Arkansas yesterday. Unfortunately, I think Mike and I both are pretty harsh with our judgment of Arkansas right now. But we'll talk about the Hogs here in a moment. Let me look for a few more Auburn comments here because overall, do you feel okay about what Auburn did? I mean, I think we both said this yesterday that it's kind of weird that it's a really good class. Quindarius Monday is a player. You mentioned Quintus Miller and is it Jibner? I never say his name correctly.
Buhner, as Aller call him.
They signed some really good kids, but man, they've got very little hype in comparison to what Alabama did get, what LSU didn't get, what Georgia got. Even Tennessee, a lot of visits don't lead to signings.
Yeah,
it's amazing how Auburn's going to end up being, right there near the top in terms of SEC classes, but very little in the way of hype.
Well, I think this was a classic early signing period. Took away a lot of the drama. I mean, they got Asa Martin, they got Joey Gatewood. I mean, a lot of these players had already signed on the dotted lines. The guy that were going to be the crown jewels of the class were already in there. I think if they'd have added, like I said, if they'd have added a Justin Ross, you'd have said, man, that's really great. But you don't feel lesser about Auburn's class after losing Justin Ross. They're still going to have the third-rated class in the SEC when it's all said and done.
James Crump says, didn't Kirk Herbstreit walk off the set when Alabama got picked through the playoffs? Same thing. He did do that. Now, I feel like the reason he did that is
he was shocked.
Yeah, he was shocked. He wasn't mad, but I know he'll regret that for the rest of his life because everybody in the country thinks he walked off because Ohio State, his alma mater, didn't make it. And it is in a lot of ways a similar situation where when someone's on camera and they just like walk off the set, I mean, there's just something about that that's just really weird. It just doesn't. It's just not what you expect to see.
Yeah, it definitely isn't. He said it before, man. I wish I wouldn't have done that. And obviously I'm a Herbstreit fan, but I just think it's obviously, it's different when it's your kid sitting next to you. I wish she would have handled it differently.
All right, we got to go. Let me get ready to knock out a couple other things. Let's do item number 9. We mentioned Tennessee before. Is it a disappointing day for Tennessee? They get J.J. Peterson, which is a much better player than Butch Jones would have ever signed. And if Greg Schiano had come here, he's not getting J.J. Peterson either. But it's a lot of silver medals, man. It's a lot of we had Isaac Taylor Stewart on campus, but he doesn't come. We had Tyson Campbell on campus. He doesn't come. We had Quay Walker throwing a Tennessee hat across the cafeteria floor. I mean, it's a first-year coach. He's never been a coach before. But, man, it was a lot of smoke that really equated to very little fire.
Yeah, they got Trevon Flowers, who's a Clemson lean, I guess, and they were able to add him to the class along with J.J. Peterson. Those are going to be the big guys that you're going to hear about today as far as Tennessee. But they lost a pair of guys to Florida State there at the last minute.
Florida State just went in there and just looted that place.
Jordan Young, Anthony Grant.
A bunch of Eagles fans after the Super Bowl, just like smashing in store windows and yanking stuff. I mean, Florida State looted that program today.
Right, and you felt like Quay Walker might, we talked about him and J.J. Peterson kind of looking at their commitments together, and obviously he throws the hat off to the side, with Tennessee. Glenn Beal's another guy. I brought up Glenn Beal a ton today because he was kind of a backup option for a lot of these programs. LSU included, Alabama included. Tennessee was on that list too. He winds up at A&M. So, like I said, good pieces for Tennessee, but you just felt like Jimmy Pruitt might be building towards something bigger than he got today.
Yeah, I mean, when you see what Florida State did into the Tennessee class day, it's tough. Like they stole more than Shane Matthews.
Yeah, I guess so.
Did you like that one?
Yeah, I like that.
All right, let's do item number 10 here on our SEC Country Live, first and 10. So we've talked a lot about Jacob Copeland at this point in time. He picks Florida. Give me a sort of synopsis of how you think Florida does. What we know now, we didn't know when the show started, is Malik Langham's also in that class as well. I mean, there's clearly, to me, a good bit of difference between Florida and Tennessee. And by the way, that y'all love hearing me say when I was wrong, or you love telling me when I was wrong. Talk about something I ended up being wrong about. I talked about how much better Tennessee was doing in recruiting in terms of making noise compared to Florida. It was a lot more noise for Tennessee, but the results are not great for Florida. But the actual tangible results, they are better for Mullen with the Gators than Pruitt with the Vols. Is that a example of Mullen being a more experienced head coach?
Probably so. He's able to close on some of these guys, make the last-minute phone calls. And I'll be honest with you, I thought early on today, and we mentioned the names earlier when we talked about some of the guys they lost to to committed elsewhere earlier in the day. I thought they were headed for a terrible day. I really did. I thought, man, if Jacob Copeland goes elsewhere, I did not expect Malik Langham to wind up down there, but they ended up today kind of finishing strong throughout the afternoon. So you're not going to blow anybody away. I think it's going to be about a 15th ranked class, but some solid pieces down there.
By the way, in the comment section, Bo Molinari says, "Yeah, it was a bad day for Tennessee. Y'all talk too much about them, and A&M just left them in the rankings. We talked about A&M for 5 minutes on a 60-minute show. We gave a solid portion of the Aggies, and you know what? A&M fans are still not happy.
Yeah, I know. We got 14 teams and only an hour to talk about them, so we can't cover everybody.
Try to take care of everybody as much
Texas
as we
A&M,
can.
Bo, focus on Texas A&M. Killed it today. Focus on Texas A&M. They had a great day.
Prudence Jane Graver on the same subject, saying we're not giving enough love to A&M. We talked about, if you're just joining us, we'd love to have you watch us all day tomorrow starting at 3 p.m. All the names that A&M adds, we told you we'd give you a little leeway in the comments.
They got Jalen Waddle coming up, I think, that has not announced yet. I think it's between A&M and Alabama. That's another big one they could add. That'd be a big deal.
Yeah, so we'll obviously be back at 3 p.m. Eastern Time tomorrow. I'll talk about that with you here in SEC Country Live. But on our program, we always close the show the same way every day. We're always looking for champions of life. And, sometimes your recruiting announcements don't quite go the way you want them to. We gave you a couple of examples of that earlier in today's show. Sometimes the prop, it doesn't quite work out, especially if it's a living prop. Take a look at 4-star wide receiver Tommy Bush choosing Georgia and his little nephew here that he brings on the screen to help him out. Well, he didn't want any part of live TV. Take a look here.
I think is it niece?
Is it a niece? Excuse me. I apologize. Sorry about that. That's what I get for being specific. So, you're right. It is a niece coming out here. So, beautiful little girl here. Got the Georgia shirt on. They're going to put her on screen. Cute. Just a cute little baby here. But
she did not like that crap.
Not liking being on television. Not happy about that whatsoever. But you know what? That's still a really cute kid and a nice, clever way for Tommy Bush to make his college announcement.
Yeah, boy, I love that. I got 2 nieces. I don't have any kids, but they're obviously a big deal to me. So I understand what he's going through.
We gotta get you some kids.
Yeah, at some point.
We gotta get you some kids, man.
Don't wish that on me yet. I don't know about that.
All right, thanks for being with us. We try to cover it all. SEC Country Live again this evening coming up. Hannah Chalker, our buddy, is going to be with you, a part of that, to kind of break down kind of everything else that happened today around National Signing Day. We're back at 3 p.m. tomorrow. We'll get the podcast up over at iTunes. You can check that out. Please share the show with your friends. Let them know we're talking about your SEC team each and every day here on SEC Country Live. Y'all have a great day, and we shall see you tomorrow.